So it's Saturday night, the 27th of June. Recording this at 30 FPS because my phone is fuzzy, and it's kind of an adjunct to my prior video of learning all the notes on the fretboard. Why you should do that, why it's helpful to do that. I didn't go over everything. I'm making this video a little bit quietly. It's late at night. I can't sleep, so my partner's in the other room. She's sleeping, so you might not be able to hear the guitar as well. Anyway, I wanted to make a quick comment on YouTube. I saw a video from Dr. Elmore's Music Lab the other day, which was quite true. Like, most of the YouTube videos that say this will change your guitar playing in 15 minutes, 90% of those videos are just not true. You're not going to improve in 15 minutes. You're not going to improve in a week. Okay, improvement takes months, years. I'm 40 years old. I started playing guitar when I was 16. I had most of my learning between ages of 16 and 20-ish, I guess. But anyway, this is an adjunct to my video of learning all the notes on the fretboard. This might be a bit longer of a video because, again, those videos, like, they're very helpful if you have a little bit of theory, but if you have any gap in your theory understanding, like, they'll just say 135, right? And you may not even know what that means. Well, 135 just means a major chord, right? But there's a more detailed way of saying it. Okay, we have the root, the major third, the perfect fifth. Okay, if you just say 135, people don't know. Or we say 135 with a circle on top of the 5 indicating a diminished fifth, and a B next to the 3 indicating a flat, or in a diminished triad, or whatever, right? Okay, so again, those videos, even the hour-long sessions going over music theory, they're not going to improve your playing the next day or the next week or probably even the next month, especially if you work a full-time job like me. So why is it important to learn all the notes on the fretboard? I'm going to try to be as succinct and concise and as brief as I can, but this might be a long video because I have like 2 ways of like helping you to learn the notes faster. Okay, so the reason why you want to know the notes on the fretboard, I mean, you could be like, hey, you know, I'm pretty sure Jimi Hendrix didn't know that fucking, you know, C was, yes, he did. Pretty fucking sure he did. And if he didn't, somebody told him. There are guitarists out there, like famous ones, who probably like don't know all the notes on the fretboard. They are just take those to the side. They don't apply to you. Those are like novel cases. Same thing with people who have perfect pitch. They're novel cases. That's not you. That's you. Maybe more than 100 people watch this. There might be one person who has perfect pitch, but luckily all of us can develop what's called relative pitch. So why do you want to know all the notes on the fretboard? Well, because it is absolutely fundamental. It is absolutely crucial, especially when you start to play with other musicians. It's absolutely crucial because you need to map this to your music theory understanding, and you don't really need to go that deep in theory. You don't really need to go that deep in theory. You just have to go deep enough. Okay, the theory isn't the hard part, actually. It's applying the theory, which is the hard part. Learning theory is just like learning arithmetic. It's like learning an easy new language. Perhaps not as hard as Spanish, although Spanish is one of the easiest languages to learn, but it's kind of like arithmetic. You're learning a new language in a way. Theory is not very hard to learn, especially, you know, you go up to intervals, chordal structure, 7 chords, maybe some add 9 chords, sustained chords, slash chords, and you do your diatonic harmonies and your modes. That's it, okay? So it's really important to know all the note names on the fretboard in order to incorporate and employ that theory, right? And when you have that theory knowledge, when you're practicing or learning something new, like a new song, like that's how we all learn at some point in time. Every single one of us, bar none, has learned by way of learning our favorite songs and all of that. If you have that theory knowledge already, just don't just go through the tab. Like, try and understand, like, what is the key signature of this song? Okay, is it C major, A minor? In that case, we have no sharps or flats. If it's G major, we have 1 sharp. If it's F major, we have 1 flat, so on and so forth, right? So it's really important that you understand that, right? Because with the theory, like if you don't actually use it while you're learning, then what's the use? So when you're playing a certain chord and you're like, hey, that sounds kind of weird to me. What is that? What is that note? And then you start counting your intervals and you realize, oh, this is just an octave of a major second. Why is it there? I thought this was a seventh chord. Maybe it's the seventh add 9 chord because you're stacking that on top of the seventh, right? Or, for example, you hear a chord and you can't tell if it's major or minor, and you look and see, and aha, there's no major third. Now you can try and check to see if there's a perfect fourth or major second, to see if there's, it's a sustained chord or a slash chord, just what have you. Those are just some examples. But again, 12 intervals. I made a video on intervals prior: minor second, major second, major second, minor second, major second, minor third, major third, and then you got the fourth, and then the fifths, and then you have the sixth and seventh, which both also have major and minor flavors. But again, a lot of the terminology can be confusing. Sometimes it's just 1, 3, 5. Some people will not, especially when you're playing with other musicians, they're not going to be like, okay, we're going to be playing root, minor, a major third, and perfect fifth. No, it's going to be 1, 3, 5, or 1, 3 flat, or 1 flat 3, 5, right? Or 1 flat 3, 5 with the circle diminished, right? So it can be confusing. And also terminology, half steps versus semitones. It's just, again, semitone and half step are the same thing. There's only 12 notes that make up the musical alphabet, so we're going to start with our first sort of method. Now, if you've ever seen a fret diagram, right? Now, if you're practicing and playing with that in front of you, where you can actually see all the notes, and it's, laid out in this fashion, that's very helpful. That might help you speed up memorizing all the notes on the fretboard, right? And if you notice, like if you know a little bit of theory, you notice, right? There's 12 notes, and we'll get to this later, E and F and B and C. There's 12 notes, and the C major scale is the only scale that has no sharps or flats. So basically, you see a fretboard diagram, and it usually only goes up to the 12th fret. It doesn't repeat in order to avoid confusion. Just the 12th fret, and everything else repeats, right? But it doesn't repeat. You notice that it's basically the C major scale across the entire neck. When you have C major, you have A minor. It's the same scale, right? C major is also C Ionian, which is one of the 7 modes, and minor, A minor is A Aeolian. So basically, when you have a fret diagram and you know the C major scale, you already know C major, D Dorian, E Phrygian, F Lydian, G Mixolydian, and B Locrian, and A minor, right? So let's start with our standard, especially if you started learning on an electric. This is probably the first week crash course for you, the minor pentatonic scale. I misfretted there, but I'm trying to play a little quietly. So we're just adding 2 notes, 2 diatonic notes to the C major scale. So if we play this in a C major and end on C, that's the C major pentatonic scale. We're just going to add 2 notes to it. Okay, we're adding the perfect fourth, which is the F. And if you notice, if you play the pentatonic scale, like just on one string, not chromatically, on one string across the entire fretboard, you notice it only has whole steps and 1.5 whole step intervals. It has no half step intervals. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be getting rid of all the 1.5 whole step intervals, and we're only going to be having half step and whole step intervals for the major scale, diatonic scale. We're only adding 2 notes. So this is a method to brute force memorizing the fretboard. Basically, learning the C major scale in all 5 positions, up and down the fretboard, and then naming them out as you're playing. It takes 5 minutes a day, and if you do this, you will be well on your way to memorizing the entire fretboard. So which notes are we adding? We're adding the F, which is a perfect fourth. Again, we're in C major, so think in C major. We're adding the F, which is perfect fourth, and we're adding the major seventh, which is the B, which resolves into our root, right? So it's going to sound like this, and I'm going to start on C because it is C major, so. That's what the C major scale sounds like. And obviously you can do it here on open string. Like C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Name them out. Be very, very observant of your root and always know where it is. Always call it out and always do an octave when you're doing this exercise. So C, I'm only going to do this once because, again, I don't want to be too loud, but C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. Now, on this first pentatonic position, some people like to play it like this. I do not like to shift positions. I just like. So yeah. Okay. Now let's move on to position 2. We're going to cover all 5 positions. So I'm just going to do this. If you have a fret diagram, it's basically this. It's the same thing. Position 2. Turn it up if you can't hear. I'll try it again. And then always stick to the root. And when you do this exercise again, do it in octave portions. And in some positions you're going to have 2 octaves, some positions you're not. Okay, so let's start here again. Okay, we're going to move on. It's going to be a little faster. Always anchor our root to the C. Third position, fourth position. Sorry about that. Anyway, that's the fourth position, and finally the fifth position. Sorry. It's just not tuned right, but fifth position. The tuning could be better on this instrument. Anyway, the tuning could be better, but again, for the fifth position. So you want to call out the notes as you play, and you want to do it descending and ascending. So you want to be able, again, I don't know if I went over this earlier, but the musical alphabet literally can be a little bit difficult to get the hang of initially. It's easy enough to name out the notes A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You stop at G. There's no H note, obviously, right? That's easy, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It's a lot more difficult to go like G, A, B, C, D, E, F, right? G, A, B, C, D, E, F. Here we're doing C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. So you want to drill that into your head, okay? And the reason that works, or that might work for you as a brute force tactic, as a brute force method to learn all the notes, is because of this little quirk that is going to help us in the sort of secondary section I'm going to move on to, which is this basic music theory, looking at any piano, layout. There's sharps and flats between every single note. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. There's sharps. There's a semitone. Okay, so A sharp is the same thing as B flat. It just depends on the context and the key signature. So that's true for all notes, with 2 exceptions, 2 intervals. Okay, B to C, which is right, and E to F. Now you wanna get your ear familiar with this 4-note sort of pattern, right? B, C, E, F. Okay, that's why That's why we're able to do that across the neck, and that's why we're using half steps, because those two notes need to have half steps. It doesn't work if you just use whole steps or 1.5 whole steps, like the pentatonic. You need to use a diatonic scale in order to capture all the notes, right? The reason I make these, more like adjunct videos or less professional videos is because I've seen all the videos, I've seen most of the videos out there, and they're usually done pretty well, but they usually kind of presuppose that you have some sort of knowledge about theory, about technique, about etc. Usually. Some of them are really good though, but there's just a glut of content on YouTube, so I try my best. Outside of that, I think like trying that exercise for 5 minutes a day, and again, I'm sorry on the last position, just the tuning on this Squire Telecaster is not great, but I'm going to change the neck to 7.25 radius. Anyway, I wanted to move on from that, and this is sort of related to my earlier point of, practicing intently. When you practice with intent, not only are you learning and forcing yourself to learn, but whether you realize or not, you're recognizing patterns. You're doing pattern recognition. And you probably realize this already, right? This is what makes the guitar so easy to play in open position, like, doing, like chord progressively. Right, something like that. It makes it super easy because it has a tuning quirk, okay, on the B string, which I'll get to in a bit. But just for now, just as we all know from my prior video on intervals, the 5th fret is your perfect 4th, right? The perfect 5th is on your 7th fret. That's why we have the power chord, right? The E5, right? So even though it's called a perfect 5th, it's actually the 7th interval, and your actual 5th interval is your perfect 4th, and the guitar is tuned that way to perfect 4th. So, right? So A is the perfect 4th of E, D is the perfect 4th of A, G is the perfect 4th of D. However, when it comes to B, okay, it's not a perfect 4th interval. It's a minor. It's a major 3rd. It's a 4th interval instead of the 5th, right? And then we go back to the perfect 4th interval for the last string, the B to the E string. This makes the guitar to play, but it makes it more difficult to navigate in terms of learning all the notes, just because of that tuning quirk. But here's one more thing that might help you on your journey. Okay, because it just so happens that the B to C interval on one string going downwards, okay, we're going downwards. So when I say perfect 4th, it's tuned to the perfect 4th. It's tuned downwards the next string. So right, I'm not going upwards. I'm just talking downwards. We can talk upwards and talk about the interval, but I'm just going to talk about downwards. Okay, just so happens that the B to C interval is the perfect 4th of the F or the E to F interval. So on each one of these strings, you have one of these intervals, one of these two intervals, B to C and E to F. Okay, so on the bass E string, it's the first, it's the nut, it's the open E, F, right? And then B, C, right? Sounds the same here. So another way to help you memorize the fretboard is to memorize that interval for each and every string. And you're only memorizing, not interval, memorizing this half step pattern, which happens twice on every string before the 12th fret between the nut, E to F, and then B to C. Here, E to F, right? Or I'm sorry, B to C. Okay, 6th string, E to F, B to C. Here, B to C, and E to F is going to start on your 7th fret. Okay, And on the D string, we go E to F first because we have the E right here. E to F. We go up to the 9th fret for B to C. The G string, we're going to get to B to C first because obviously we're in G. We're on the G string, so we're going to go next to A. It's going to be B to C first, and that's going to be starting on your 4th fret. B to C, right? And then later on, E to F is going to be on your 9th fret. Again, perfect 4th. B to C, E to F. Because we haven't gotten to the B string yet, so we haven't hit that tuning quirk. So every time you hear B to C, like B to C here, you know that on the next string it's E to F. And you know E to F is going to come down later as well, okay? So that's really good pattern recognition right there. Okay, so that was the G string. What about the B string? Okay, B string, open B to C. And then E to F is going to start on your 5th fret, because that's going to be our E, right? But what happens if we have a B to C interval on the G string, right? That's going to be on your 4th fret. Because it's tuned to a major third instead of a perfect 4th, we just shift one half step up for the parallel sort of perfect 4th, because we don't have a perfect 4th on the B string. This only applies on the G string, B to C, and B string, E to F. Move up a half step. Okay, now we went over the B string, right? And then the 9th fret, so the 9th fret. No, sorry. 5th fret. So learn those two intervals, and again, the E string. Right? So learn those like intervallic structures. These sort of like quirk, you know, when you have B to C. Now there's a relation from E to F to B to C, but it's more complex to explain. It's not like parallel, like you can just string skip. Like that, right? You can find the B to C interval. You'll find E to F on the next note. You go to the 9th fret. Anyway, hope that's helpful. Sorry for the errors I made playing. I'm playing this kind of softly and at night. If you can't hear the video, try to turn the volume up if you can. And thank you for watching. Again, it's really important to nail down every single note on the fretboard. Why? I mean, it's just it's hard to explain. Like, I didn't learn by rote memorization, by like brute forcing it and like consciously memorizing it. I just learned by like just playing for like 3 years. It took probably 3 or 4 years for me to learn all the notes on the fretboard up to the 12th fret, right? And as soon as I was able to do that, though, once you know all the notes on the fretboard, you have so much more access. Your mind is expanded. Now, keep this in mind. In my personal opinion, in my personal experience, learning guitar is not about muscle memory. Like, there's songs that I learned like a year ago that I can't play now. There's no muscle memory involved. Like, I can't play those songs, or a solo, or, you know, I don't have the technique. I think most of it's in your head, okay? You're building new neural connections and pathways. And yes, it is more difficult as you get older to learn more, but it's mostly in your head, okay? So that's why it's very important when you're practicing, not just a noodle. Like, even if you're learning a new song or a new solo and you consider that new, that's still noodling to me if you're not practicing intently, meaning if you're not like thinking about, okay, this is a D, this is an F, okay. Like, even if you're learning like a classic solo, let's say Queen Bohemian Rhapsody, Brian May's amazingly beautiful solo, you can spice it up. You can add spice notes to it, chromatic notes, passing notes, bluesy, jazzy notes, seventh notes, etc. So it's incredibly helpful because once you do have all the notes, so many possibilities open up. You don't even have to be that good I mean, your brain is going to be a lot faster than your hands. And that's why you practice, okay? Because for your hands to keep up with your brain. But once you know all the notes, so many possibilities open up, okay? So we just went over two sort of techniques. One, brute force rote memorization, which I think works if you practice 5 minutes a day. And number two, pattern recognition, the two half-step intervals that are tuned to perfect fourths as to B to C to E to F, not the other way around. But I hope that was helpful. Again, there's so much guitar videos on YouTube since I started this channel. I started this channel in like 2016. I made some guitar like tutorials and stuff, and it's just been such a huge explosion. But most of the content is it's super helpful, especially if you have an understanding of theory. But if you're just coming in as a beginner and it has a clickbait title, it's probably too good to be true. You're not going to be the next Stevie Ray Vaughan in 15 minutes. Nobody. That's impossible. So anyway, I hope that was helpful. Cheers.